Hello, today is Friday, April 19th, 2019. This is the Testing Commons subproject meeting. We have a light agenda, but we have stuff to walk through in our backlog too. So, Andrew, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure thing. So last week, Tim had suggested that the first thing we do to tackle this problem with kind of code cleanliness and organization of the testing framework is to go through some of the utils files and see if some of the methods there can be removed or like moved to a separate package or whatnot. So we've been getting a lot of contributors helping there. We're finding that some of the packages are really, some of the files are really easy to clean up, but some of them like util.go is massive and a lot of things are importing things from that. And so John and I started collaborating on a Google Doc on how we can break just util.go into separate smaller tasks. And so we wanted opinions on what people think, how people think this can be broken up to. So in the doc, what I did was I just printed out all the methods in util.go, and then I put a proposed package structure for how we should, where we should move all these files. So what we can do is like we can delegate a package to each person, and then each person can go through the list of methods, see if it belongs to that package, and then open a PR for that.
That seems reasonable to me. I was actually doing a PR review for somebody who submitted a massive GoLint modification for util.go, and the first thing I looked at this last week was that it is a ginormous thunk. So I'm wholeheartedly in support of it because, in particular, I was noticing there were things specific to given areas.
Yeah.
The one thing that's going to be a little bit weird are common functions, right? And how they get used across some of it. I think just teasing it apart one by one is the way to go, and start with the simple ones. So you could easily tell right away that node and pod were easy to disentangle, right? Because I was looking at that like just the other day. Some of the other ones, like there's services should be reasonable to disentangle, endpoints should be reasonable to disentangle. Some other ones are going to be a little bit weirder just because of the cascading dependencies, but I'd start simple. I think pods and nodes make a ton of sense. It should be easy to rip out. I like the idea. I think should go forth and do it.
All right.
I would add it to that umbrella issue though. So if you're looking over here, where's this one? Maybe add the doc as a...
Yeah, I'll figure out a way to maybe break up that into a separate checklist and description. But are folks are we happy with do we need to discuss further on the package naming or whatever, or do we think it's reasonable?
I think it's reasonable so long as that when you factor out the dependencies for the tests that inherit from it, that it's clean. I think that should be reasonable.
Okay, sounds good.
On a PR basis. I did want to comment, I don't know if it's people that are working on this one or people that are overlapping with the conformance effort. Because I know people watch the recordings because there's a bunch of people who are submitting patches that are not on the call. And so if you're listening later on, I do appreciate GoLint style PRs, but they're not of greater importance at this point. So actually executing against the milestones, if you want to lint alongside of doing these modifications, that's even better, right? Because sometimes when I get a bunch of onesie twosie PRs, it can be time consuming to try and figure out what effort this is going along with. And whether or not it's a rando, because part of being an approver is figuring out if people want to be engaged in the community or if they're just doing flybys, right? And if a person wants to be engaged in the community, doing this type of effort is more beneficial. to the community as a whole, and you can add your linting along the way with the other refactor work.
Yeah, I think another umbrella issue just for GoLint, and a lot of the test packages fall under there. So I don't think, I think a lot of those folks just opened it and then you happen to be the assigned approver.
Well, yes and no, because I've seen them come and go, and a lot of them are Japanese. So I know that some Japanese company has been working with the CNCF and listening to our recordings and other stuff, and they're getting some type of approval from somebody to do work. And what I'm trying to do is, like, that's fine if you want to do linting, right? But do it with this other work, so it's not 2 or 3 or 4 separate steps on the approval road, because it just optimizes everybody's time, and you're doing better work of more substantial value to the community.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Do folks, I know some other people, is everyone on board with what we're doing and why? Know why we're doing this? I have a chat window, so I don't know how many people are on. Oh, it's just, George, have you been able to engage at all? I know you said you wanted to work on some stuff last time.
Giving it a try. I open a small PR to refactor the deployments util from the framework. But I've been Lubomir and Dims have been helping me a lot with how to just get the test passing.
Okay.
Yeah, been figuring some things in there.
Yeah, the a minor problem is knowing and understanding how to exercise the changes that you made on a localized kind cluster is probably the most optimal way. And I don't think we actually have that documented anywhere.
We don't, because basically there was a plan to move to kubetest 2, except that kubetest 2 is currently on hold. And basically, recently somebody posted comments about this as well, and I basically should take my responses and document it, except that I don't know where. Maybe the page where we document local cluster up.
Yes. I'm a big fan of documentation that lives or resides close to the code. I've been not a fan of how we've bifurcated documentation inside of the community. Because if a person's working on an area, then they just see it right there in front of their face. Maybe a simple README guide in the end-to-end directory, or readme.md. Let's take a look here for a second. Yeah, this is not a helpful README. This is not a helpful README.md. And if we wanted to, we could do it underneath this main section. If we wanted to outline like how a developer could, get started modifying, like welcome to the end-to-end tests, yar, there be dragons, and outline how to get involved and how to actually verify your changes are running and working properly.
Yeah, what is the link in there? The end-to-end -test link.
I think it links out to the community.
Yeah. So Aaron might have objections of us adding docs.
Yeah. Well, I think we can modify this one if we wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's your call.
Hold on 1 second here.
I cannot approve changes in this file, so it's easier for me to.
Why don't I take that? So, George, have you had a chance to read through this document?
Yes.
Okay. Is it helpful or is it confusing?
It is helpful, but there's so much crap that it's really good, but there's still a lot. So for example, it gives a good overview of, for example, how to run cube test and all. But the problem that I've been having is I don't exactly know how to test just the part that I'm working on, and that's really the only documentation that I found related to testing.
I also have a problem with Gink Go and Focus. It doesn't work as I expected to work. For instance, if I want to test a single file instead of a namespace or like using the focus, there is this flag for Gink Go that lets you provide a path to what test you want to test, but it doesn't work, and it basically runs everything again. Also, the focus, I cannot get the focus to work correctly. I see no errors. It just runs the whole suite again.
So focus definitely works properly, but it's it might be a quoting problem or something on the input arguments, because.
I mean, I know it works because we have it in CI, but I cannot focus on a super granular level. I want to test a single change. It basically runs a lot of stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's part of the behavioral test. Like it stands up all this jiggery beforehand because there's the before suites and after suites.
Yeah, so I can document things, but as you see, I'm explaining right now that basically I cannot get it to work as expected, let's say.
Well, let's write down the friction. Like, what is it that I think what would help is like what is it that you want? Or what is it you're trying to do? I think that would go a long way. Like what I would do first is outline a couple of user stories of what it is you want to do. Like I want to refactor this end-to-end test, and then I want to be able to just run that test, right? That I just refactored. And outlining that user story or that developer story inside of here will be like an action item for us to do.
You can assign this to me. I need to figure things out on a granular level.
Maybe you can also work with Zhai Tong and get him engaged. I'm throwing you under a bus.
Yeah, I can definitely work on this. Yeah.
Okay. Other action item follow-up stuff that folks are working on. Otherwise, I can go through our current list.
Just one more thing to mention. So there's another file, serviceutil.go. It's also a very large file. It's over 1,500 lines. I think we can also break it up into small files. I just looked into it, but not dig too much. Just prepared a first step cleanup pull request. But I can also do prepare a doc like Andrews, or just append to Andrews doc and to see that what we can do to that file.
Well, service util it doesn't need to be broken apart as much because it's at least isolated and localized to just being services. Like you could break it apart, but you could do the shuffle first, and the depth graph changes, And if it needs to be broken, more modularized, then that's reasonable. If you need to rip out stuff, but at least it's localized to.
Yeah, but I think that such a large file is hard to maintain as there's so many functions and methods.
This is a little weird. I have not looked in detail at service util.
There's a lot of like get nodes, get pod stuff as part of service util.
But why? This is like part of this.
I think that's for the bouncers.
Yeah, but this functionality exists all over the place. Like, I don't understand why it's a function of this struct when like you have this behavior in the framework all over the place. It's not like get nodes, like this is a service utility library, and they have this service test jig struct, and it has a sub-element called get nodes. When, like, if I were to look all over the framework, I don't know how many different get nodes I would find, but it'd probably be a lot.
Yeah, there's quite a few.
Like I'd expect things like update service or fail. That makes total sense for a service utility file. Yeah, so you might want to do this in pieces, Shaitong. Like just do the shuffling first and find out who's depending upon this stuff. And then you might even evaluate some of these functions and their utilities. I think that's on your major refactor list, service util.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to break that onto separate issues, Jaiton, go ahead. Yeah, I know that this is not going to be easy to break apart all these different utilities. Any other questions currently about the current action items? I saw John had an action item, and I know he's out today, but I'll add it to the. There's an issue about like having 70 whatever containers. Let's see if he has the issue broken down here. Nope. All right, so I did see him file an issue, but I think it might be underneath conformance, so I'll loop back on that. All right, if there aren't any other agenda items, let's walk through the issues list and see if we can get some consensus on some of these things. Does that seem reasonable? Does anyone have any other questions about the major, this major push?
I do want to say one thing. So SIG Architecture kicked off the code organization project this week.
Yeah.
And so I will be giving, like, this effort is on their radar, and so I'll be giving frequent updates around what we're doing here when I go to those meetings.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if they're going to care as much. I know they care a lot about like the refactoring the internal code base, but I think it is worthwhile. This is a refactor, so. All right. Who's running that? Is that DIMS?
Yeah, it's DIMS.
Okay. All right, so first up, this was new and I read it, and there's not an easy answer to this one. So the TLDR is that people ideally would like to run the conformance suite as fast as possible, because when they run it in Sonobuoy, we purposely run it slow because we could be running on somebody's actual production environment. And that's fine, but there are still a set of serial tests that exists And when people want to do things as fast as possible, that these serial tests become a gatekeeper to them or a blocker. And what I postulate is that not really a postulate, it's more like it's real, is that a bunch of the serial tests are not necessarily need to be serial. And there's a bunch of conflating goo in the test suite that needs to actually be looked at under the microscope to evaluate whether or not we want to do this. I think that to fix this work is more difficult, and I realize that almost everyone working on this stuff is double booked. So I think it's a worthwhile effort, but I think it's secondary to some of those other refactorings. What do other people think?
I mean, right now the solution is to run the suite in a couple of passes.
Yeah.
But so recently I saw I looked at the serial test in the conformance suite, and those are the daemon set tests. Do we have anything else? I haven't checked.
I would have to look through it. The conformance suite is growing a lot this cycle, and there haven't been a lot of serial ads that I've seen as I've walked through it, but there are a set of serial tests. I don't exactly know what they are. To get the full list, you'd have to do focus is conformance and do a dry run, and then you would get the full list of all the tests.
Oh. So, for instance, I didn't know that there is a dry run. That's good.
Yeah, so you can do a dry run. Like whenever you want to do an evaluation, that should be part of like the documentation if you're doing a developer. If you want to verify the test that you will run before you do anything, do a dry run first and verify that your regex that you use for focus and skip is giving you what you want.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So the serial tests, if we have to run the suite in serial mode, the conformance suite, it takes around 1 hour and 40 minutes.
Well, depends where you run it, but yeah.
I mean, in Pro, that's...
Yeah, in Pro it'll take a long time.
Yeah, and if we run everything in parallel with like a ridiculous number of nodes, it takes like 25 minutes. So it's kind of a trade-off. Should we keep these serial tests to be conformance even, or should we remove the serial label instead?
Well, we'd have to figure out we'd have to evaluate the test and see what it's doing and verify that it truly needs to be serial. I don't think most of those tests, they might be long, right? But I don't think they necessarily need to be serialized, right? There's no reason why, as long as there's capacity, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to run the daemon set tests in parallel with everything else.
Yeah, because of these tests, we are like delaying. I mean, the comparison in the time is like 5 times slower. I mean, that's one of the actions. The other action is to basically instruct people to do a couple of passes, and maybe we should do the same for. Actually, John already said that Sonoboy is doing that as part of the instructions.
Yeah. So we can. So who's affected by this the most? Who are the major stakeholders, and what is it they want? Other than speed, like, because a lot of the conformance tests, a lot of the end-to-end test suites are basically periodics that people pay no attention to, except for when things fail. So like, so long as they're green, they don't really care about SLOs. Who are the primary people that really want this, I guess?
I mean, probably, yeah, that's a link, but I guess the question is for DIMS.
Oh, this is the I can follow up with DIMS, I guess, on this one.
But I mean, we shouldn't examine like who are the stakeholders. I think we should like proceed with some sort of an action for this in the long term.
Well, I do. What I'm trying to figure out is, should we triage this for 115? And what's the importance level of this?
Oh yeah, we can apply important long term and some label, some milestone next or something like that. Because,
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
But also we have to coordinate with the SIGs that own the tests.
Yeah. Yep. That's fine. I'm going to assign John, because he's not here. And I'll help him with it.
Hey, Tina. I would say the developer who set up their conformance test CI are the one who will be benefit from this, because my experience with conformance test debugging is the debug time just add up. If you got some failure and you have to figure out and fix and retest, take a couple of hours for a simple fix.
Yeah, you basically have to skip the serial tests unless the bug is in the serial tests. Then you have to run it slowly.
Yeah, we can run and fix individual tests, but it's like every time we have to run it again fully to make sure it's passed. But that's going to take a few hours.
Yeah, also the serial run is slightly less flaky.
Well, I'll assign. Do you want me to assign you to Hui? We can always change priority on this as people get frustrated by it. What's your GitHub handle?
The next one, Figo A50.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm gonna go like this. All right. So it looks like a lot of people are already signed up to do the umbrella work. Consolidate test images. Oh, he did have the issue open, created.
But this is about the documentation for the images, I guess. Only.
Consolidate testing and improve documentation. This is two parts. We'll have to sync offline. I'll sync offline with it in this one. Refactoring cleanup utils, that's the one we're talking about. Decoupling cloud providers from end-to-end testing framework. Is that the other umbrella issue? I think part of the other work is to help this.
I'm going to create a new issue with the developer documentation and link it here.
Okay, just apply the end-to-end framework label.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, E2E test framework.
I wanted to focus on the last issue by Jeff that's in the list. So I already started doing what basically this ticket recommends, because everywhere we have no annotation for the error that happens. So basically, after have occurred, you can add basically some text of what is the reason for this timeout. Basically, if I see a PR, I saw a PR yesterday that didn't have annotations, so I immediately recommended them. So I just wanted to say that we should do this.
2016.
Yeah, it's broad.
Yeah.
I mean, this is important long term, but or something like backwalk maybe, because there are a lot of these that do not have annotations.
Are there other people? This is a good way for George, for you to get engaged too, or of other people that want to do this. I would parse backwards and talk with the test infra group, because they have good apparatus to determine what are the most flaky tests. They actually have like a counter, and it's all punched into BigQuery, and they have charts and graphs for all this. So you can actually figure out, you can ask like Feda to give you, Feda, or I guess Aaron probably could too, to give you a summary of what are the most flaky tests, and then start with those first. Are there other folks that want to work on this?
I want to.
What's your IRC handle, George?
Alejandro, ALEJANDRO, the next one, and the last one.
Right.
Yeah, the problem here is that if you want to change something that doesn't have an annotation, you don't really know what to add as an annotation. You have to ask the appropriate SIG. I mean,
well, you can bisect the tests. Like if you read through the tests, most of the tests are pretty self-explanatory. They're not like earth-shattering.
Yeah, sure, but it takes time. It's not a quick change.
It's not a quick change, because you have to read through everything just to figure out what they're actually doing. And some of the tests are not intuitive. And this was the main one. So the last two umbrella issues are kind of overlapping with each other. I think we have plenty of work to do. Are there any other questions, folks? It's all been triaged in larger umbrella issues, and we have a couple of action items. One is for the documentation, and for me to follow up on the status.
Maybe we can look at some of the PRs, at least on the list. Not necessarily like enter every single PR for linting. I wanted to talk about a single PR that Jordan sent as well.
Let me close down some of this here. You got a link?
I mean, if you click on the test end-to-end framework label, it should show the PRs as well. Let me set the link. Okay, it's in chat.
I think I have the same query.
Yeah.
Hold on one second here. We actually have it listed there. Better. Which one do you want to look at first?
The one by Legit from 3 days ago. Yeah, remove special handling of master label nodes. This is currently on hold. Basically, the existing logic to get the list of schedulable nodes uses the master node row, like we have in KubeADM. Also, COPS has it.
Yeah.
So basically, Jordan's PR removes like this logic from the framework completely. The problem there is that we now don't. There's no good logic to determine if the node is schedulable or not. So basically, the suite waits for indefinitely until the Go routines basically sig abort. That's the problem. Basically, Jordan said that he's going to send an update, but he has not sent one yet. I just wanted to get your feedback on this change in general.
I don't think we can do it because of all the other dependent deployments that depend upon this label. And this label has been around for a long time. It's not just one deployment, it's many. Right?
Yeah. So,
but he's not necessarily not getting rid of it.
Well, he is removing it from the logic that detects if so when the suite is starting, it first makes a query to get the list of nodes that are all workloads to be scheduled. And previously we had this the label as part of this logic, but now Jordan is removing it, and this basically we have to change it in a way that, okay, if a node does not have the unschedulable effect for the taint, we can basically consider this node to be something that we can schedule on, except that currently the logic is broken. But so it's a wider question, like what is the initial state of the cluster that we should consider as a starting point for the workloads that the suite is going to deploy. Like, say I have a master node and a couple of workers. My master has a taint, not necessarily having the
schedule.
Yeah,
because you need daemon sets, you need the CNI, you need other stuff to land on that machine, and it should have the appropriate handling for the taints.
Yeah, my thinking was that if there is a taint that is basically something is unschedulable, it doesn't matter, the name of the taint does not matter, the key, only the effect. We ignore this node and also only take the nodes that don't have taints.
I would agree. Or you need to add a parameter that there's another wider problem with taints in the end-to-end test suite, where some people, like, because the end-to-end test suite, there's a fundamental problem with a lot of the core developers, in that they do not realize that this test suite is run in the wild with the many incantations that currently exist. So a lot of people will defaultly taint their whole cluster. And we need to have a default tolerations plumbing that allows you to say what would be run in this environment. And there's an issue for that. I just need to figure out where it is.
Yeah, Jordan's solution to that is to add a label selector, and it works, except that now even Sunoboy has to apply this. It's basically, this PR is breaking everything. And I think that the label selector should be optional. That's fine, but the default should be like figuring out what taints to. Basically, if there is a taint unschedulable, we ignore this node. And I think there should be a default logic that works everywhere. And the label selector is the optional solution that this PR provides.
Why don't I look through this with a fine-tooth comb today, and we can sync offline on this particular one.
Yeah, thanks. I like the change, but we just have to fix the waiting logic because it's broken.
There's some older. That's the oldest one. There were some older PRs that have been sitting around forever. I did take a look at some of them, but they crossed over areas. So some of these things that have been hanging around, I don't think we can even really do anything. So I'd probably just focus on the newer stuff. Here are the examples of the GoLint ones that have been flying by that I've been seeing. Golang.
Yeah, I mean, if it's in the framework, I can approve, but if it's in some API machinery test, I cannot. So we hold.
I willfully took myself out of, like when I switched to Heptio, I willfully took myself out of all of API machinery. It's a wonderland I never want to. It's, I don't know.
Yeah.
I have colorful things to say, but I don't think it's appropriate. It's very difficult, thorny, and multi-pronged Hydra.
There is another PR that merged from Patrick Oli about the flags. That's basically David Eads reported some problems. Patrick Oli fixed the problems, and then I believe Justin Santa Barbara said like currently only the end-to-end testing framework is using Viper in Kubernetes.
Yes, and we that was a broader, like we should be using component config. But did that actually emerge? I think I put a hold on it, didn't I?
No, the PR from Patrick merged. So the problem there is that I need to find the link for this, but anyway, I basically said that we should probably consider end-to-end test suite version 2 because the current suite using the introduction to of Viper inside the suite, people are already depending on the Viper exposure, and we want to remove Viper, and we also want to consolidate all the flags. So maybe what Test Infra did, they said that kube test is completely unmaintainable at this point, so we should create kube test 2. Maybe we should do the same, which basically if you want to use the old version, okay, but mind that we have this new version that is better, the flags are better maintained and things like that.
Well, the SLOs around the end-to-end test suite are that you only use the version that you have. And wrapper runners like Sonobuoy wrap the behavior so that you shouldn't be exposed and directly using 90% of the flags and arguments that exist to the end-to-end testing framework. It's meant to do that on purpose to simplify the user, because the sheer number of flags that actually exists inside of the end-to-end testing framework is actually phenomenal, in my opinion, because it exposes all of Ginkgo as well as all of the other parameters that are kind of riddled throughout the tests without us having like a centralized. We have this thing called the test context, which is terrible, versus like a broken down set of substructures very akin to how kubeadm kind of has its config. But we should have a component config very analogous to how, and well thought out, that's composable, very analogous to how we address things in kubeadm. That's the pattern we should be mimicking here. If people depended upon those things from the end-to-end test suite, I don't think we have any guarantees, because it's a consumable artifact, but I don't think we follow the same policy for the test suite or ever have.
Yeah, that's true. I spoke with Stealthybox and Michael Taufen about basically what are the plans in terms of the working group component standard handling the flag problem in Kubernetes. Mm-hmm. So basically they said that Michael does not even know what Viper is, so he has to like investigate and consider. He also immediately brought some problems with Kubernetes implementing their own like version of Viper or something like that. So basically I brought this to them as a topic because the only reason Viper was included in the framework was the exposure of fields as flags.
Yes. And that was done like years ago, right?
Yeah. But there's a transitive dependency that Viper pulls something that I think Justin Santa Barbara wanted to get rid of. And that's why like he asked, like, why do we even depend on Viper? Can we remove it? But we cannot. Because people like already depend on it.
Well, Andrew, if you're going to that separate SIG arch, working group with regards to code structure. Like boosting up the component config work should be like a primary function of that, because if you're globally across every single component inside of Kubernetes, if you were to actually try to ascertain how we do config file handling and how we do feature gates in a uniform systematic way, you'd probably lose your mind. The sheer volume and number of knobs and bells and whistles that exist across is totally in an unmaintainable state. Like last I looked, the thing was 213 arguments to the kubelet. That's an obscene number of knobs, right? It's like NASA engineer style.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I don't think in the first meeting the component config topic came up at all.
I'll sync with Dims on both the serial stuff, because I sync with him pretty regularly anyways. Serial stuff and component config. One of the things I want to try to do, and one of the things I have a tendency to do, you'll find is I want to find the highest priority thing that eliminates core problems in the DAG and concentrate fire on those things. This one's lower priority for me. Like this one, lower priority. I don't know if you can even see it. You can't see it. Serial's lower priority, but component config is up there. Is higher priority.
It feels to me like we still kind of don't have the the super high priority for this group. Like we have some.
Well, the primary function, the highest priority thing is to refactor the end-to-end test suite to be able to vendor it in easily. So the most important ones are decoupling cloud provider and the framework refactor. So the work that we're currently doing for the utils function to get them out is a portion of the decoupling.
So question, when you say test suite, can we get clarity on if we mean that we want to be able to vendor in the EDE testing framework or the whole suite?
Framework, sorry, my bad.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the framework refactoring out is high priority.
Yeah, so if we want to be able to do, so right now, in order for you to extract cloud providers, right, to get them all the way out of tree, we need to be able to have the framework easily importable and to have them be able to vendor in a depth graph that doesn't like subsume the universe. And part of that was like changing the client set to use the external client set. That was a good progress forwards. Then also the dependency graph, because the utils are smashed into framework, you import in all the dependencies that are there, even though you might only need a portion of the framework, right? So slowly teasing apart those utilities is a generally useful thing to allow cloud provider extraction, but also to allow other people to use the framework in a more substantial way. So that includes Patrick's work, right, for storage people. So the CSI drivers are a good example there. If a CSI provider, whatever that may be, wants to be able to create their end-to-end test suite, they should be able to vendor the framework and have it usable in a non-suck way. So that's the primary goal of this effort. The primary function is to refactor the test suite to be this composable toolbox that people can use. And we're getting there. The work that I've seen so far has been positive. Should we outline that in the doc as our North Star?
Yeah, maybe a couple of sentences for.
Yeah, I can do that. We're also running a little long time. I think the primary P0, which should be clear, is to refactor the Pentium framework to be easily vendorable, which is not really a word, well, into other projects with a minimal set of transitive B. Does that resonate? Make sense? Feel free to, Smith. Cloud providers, CSI, drivers. Cloud provider, CSI drivers, assembly, plugins. There's a bunch of other things that are outside the core. CRD creators, K8 extensions, we'll call that.
Profiles.
Profiles. ... Well, we got a couple more minutes. We should probably enumerate this one. Like P1, I would say would be to, that's the primary North Star. P1 probably user experience or I don't know if it's code organization and behavior or if it's user experience.
The flags are probably the flags / config is here probably.
Improved user experience. General test cleanup. And performance. Oops, what's that? This includes error reporting, surfacing errors, surfacing errors in a debuggable way, in a user-friendly way. And overall performance of the test suite. That's probably enough.
Yeah, I have a question, but maybe we can at least define roughly what the answer to this is, because it's like kind of deep question, detailed one. So what is the rule of thumb in terms of the framework like what should we include in the framework, import in the framework, and what we shouldn't. Like if we say that staging is something that we can import, that's fine, probably. But probably package is not a good idea, or like to my understanding, if we move the framework to a new repo and somebody uses Go modules and like say imports like the framework in his project, they basically should not pull anything that is from case.io / and here is my question mark, like we should basically define what is not a good import path.
Let's baby steps. I think we'll get there. I think there's so much low-hanging fruit before we get to the point of staging that I think we have plenty of work to do. I do see what you're saying. That's the end game, right? Like where are we going to have this thing live and how do we set up the import boss and everything else to make sure that we're not doing, it doesn't violate those properties. And so it has to be a good vendorable library. But I think there's just an obscene amount of work to get us there first.
I think one thing that could help is maybe right now we can add a import restrictions file so that we don't add additional dependencies while working on it.
Yeah, this is something that Tim suggested, that we should add the import boss file to the framework already, except that I need to figure out something else about it. Does anybody want to take the import boss action item?
We should create an issue for that.
Yeah, I'm going to create an issue for it. There are examples all over the place. Yeah.
Anything else? I only have some logistic stuff before we end. So when people are new to the testing framework and they're making modifications and folks are reviewing, make sure that they have one commit per type of change that they're making. So sometimes people will do like refactor work along with some other work that has a theme. You know, we do this and everything else, so we should make sure that we adhere to that same pattern as well. So like John's was an example where he did refactor work in his code along with the actual shuffle, which was part of the other thing. So long as they're factored into two separate commits, it's easier for people who are walking through, because when you're doing this at scale and you have lots to review, that lots and lots, right? When you're doing this at scale, then you have this thing where you're like, why are you doing this? And then you have to keep on asking those questions over again. So let's just make sure that when we review stuff that we call out stuff to be as atomic commits, and then it'll be like refactoring work for blah, blah, to make it a little cleaner for readability or whatever. And then like, okay, I guess that makes sense. Great. I got nothing else, and we're already out of time, so I'll call it here. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, bye.
Okay.